Hi, my name is Gary Rudman, and this is just a brief summary of my presentation. So we'll be talking about Gen Z, and we'll talk about four different keystrokes, each of which help you better understand where Gen Z is coming from, so you can market to them better, so you can research with them better, and so you can just generally understand them better. We have to understand first who Gen Z is. So they're born between 97 and 2012. They're about 13 to 28 years old. And the big thing about them is you are not Gen Z. Now, of course, some of you out there are Gen Z, but the rest of you, if you think that you understand them, if you think that you get it because you were a teenager once or you're a young person once, you don't. It's a different world that they've grown up with. And that's what this presentation is all about. Because here's what happens. Gen Z has a very short attention span. In For millennials, according to TikTok, for millennials, it's about a 12 second. They have about a 12-second attention span. For Gen Z, they have an 8-second attention span. And so that just means that if you don't get it the first time, they are ready to move on. They have already left the building. So Denny's, they kind of got it. Burger King didn't get it in this case, and they may not come back if there's a lot of work to do to get them to come back to your point of view. And we see this all the time. 82% of brands think they get Gen Z, and 31% of Gen Z agree with them. That means it's a huge, huge gap. And so many companies are doing this. And so that's why we've developed these four keystrokes. And this is what they have to understand. So basically, we have the alt, which is how Gen Z is just distinctly different from millennials, from Gen X, from boomers. They have grown up in an entirely different world. We'll talk a little bit about that in this brief summary. We'll talk about shift, how these guys are champions of change. They look at the world in a different way, they approach it in a different way, and you have to learn. Everyone around them has to understand where they're coming from in order to work with them. It's like you have to put their filter on to understand this generation. We'll talk about how they're the control where they're really defiantly standing up for their own opinions. So we call these awareness arbiters. If you start using the wrong pronouns or using certain words, they are aware and they'll correct you. And finally, we'll talk about Control Z or undo, which is the whole idea is they're accustomed to being online and having that ability to sort of vet and change and cater their image out to the outside world. Of course, they still make mistakes, but there's a lot more control in there. Yet when they get into the real world, there's this whole discomfort. We just wrote an article recently about talkwardness, the idea of that there's just this uncomfortable. They just have this general uncomfortable, awkward feeling being in the real world and having to talk to people in person versus over a device.